All right. We are going to turn to our next item. All right. So, we are going to get a comprehensive briefing about HOC, which is the county's premier affordable housing developer, provider. And Linda has been working with our team to prepare for today. Linda, do you want to set us up? I thought those papers looked unfamiliar. All right.
I've met Councilmember Giwando. I'm friends with Councilmember Giwando. I've served with Councilmember Giwando, and you are not. No.
Well, it's the first time anyone has ever confused us, I think. That was my doing. All right. Linda.
This really is, just as you said, this is an opportunity to have a more in-depth discussion with HOC about their efforts to both increase the amount of affordable housing through production, as well as preserve affordable housing through their efforts at right of first refusal and renovation of existing properties. And it gives you an opportunity to have more discussion than we usually end up with when we're kind of constrained by a budget time frame, trying to get through work sessions. So I don't have a whole lot of really opening remarks on this, but I think that they've provided you a very comprehensive presentation, and it will show you the range of their partnership in affordable housing in Montgomery County and the potential for what the future can hold for increasing both the amount of affordable housing, but housing altogether in the county through some of the new partnerships that they've entered into in the last few years. So with that, I would just turn it over to HOC.
Terrific. Thank you.
Good morning, Councilmember Reamer and members of the PHED committee. Pardon my voice. It's been an exciting couple days for me. But this is all from soccer. This is purely soccer dad voice right now. But I do apologize.
It's a badge of honor to have your
There
voice
you go.
worn out cheering from the sideline.
I thought you were like really working hard negotiating
I know, I was
terms
wondering.
of
I was
a
wondering.
housing agreement or a lease. So I was about to be very impressed.
I think the preferred strategy there is just not to talk, right? So yeah. Just really quickly, my name is Stacy Spann. I'm the executive director of HOC, but I want to quickly point to and acknowledge two of our commissioners who are in the audience, Chair Jackie Simon, Vice Chair Rick Nelson, who are right behind me. And it's
Thank you both for your work on the commission.
and then the rest of team HOC, I'll give them a second to introduce themselves. We're interspersed throughout the room as well. So, Zach.
Zach Marks, real estate.
Kayreen Brown, mortgage finance and real estate.
And Catherine Hollister, real estate.
So just to begin, I want to applaud you on your efforts to hear from the Economic Development Committee just before us. And I'd like to note that interspersed in this presentation is really what our economic impact is on this great county. And so we'll get to that, but I want to preface it all by saying that housing is lifeblood. It's typically not what folks think of as an economic development activity, but as these slides will indicate, and the work that we're doing indicates every single year and day, it is in fact an incredible stimulus for our county. Not only does it stabilize families who have significant and urgent need, but it also helps to spur activity in surrounding localities and submarkets throughout this great county. So with that, I mean, that's a great introduction. And so I'll say that
Housing is an economic development issue. I mean, plain and simple.
you
It
go.
is at the core of your success as a community.
There you go. And so we at the commission, and I'm going to invite everyone else at the table to just jump in whenever, and you can, of course, interrupt with questions as you see fit. But we do three simple things at the commission, and we get people housed, we keep them housed, and we help families and individuals reach their fullest potential. And as we turn to this, we focused a few years ago on a few affordable housing priorities, and they're on the screen. You got them in front of you, but essentially we wanted to preserve and expand the county's housing safety net, and preserve at-risk affordable housing, reinvest, and this is a really significant one, reinvest in existing affordable housing, expand the supply of affordable housing, and then support affordable housing reinvestment and expansion by private and for-profit developers. That last one is one of the hallmarks, and it's one that we really don't talk much about, but we are also a rated housing finance agency. We technically compete with the state of Maryland's Department of Housing and Community Development, which is also a housing finance agency. We issue bonds and as a consequence are able to support additional housing development beyond that HOC does. And so simply put, Councilmember Reamer, thank you so much at the beginning for noting that we are the preeminent affordable housing provider in this county. We work hard at that. We every year try and get better at it. And contrary to the view of some folks, we're not simply serving the lowest income persons. We actually have a spectrum of persons in this county we serve. The goal is to try to serve every single one of these families and individuals well, equally well, that is. And in doing so, we have adopted a mixed income model and continue to tweak it and manage it. And if you see some of the properties, there's a notion that they're 100% market rate, or we just do so much market rate. The thing is, we would be asking for far more support if we did purely low income, or if we did purely affordable. We would be asking for significant amounts of capital, financial capital, from the county, the state, and the federal government where we could get it. And the fact that this county has embraced a mixed income model for well over 40 years is the thing that really allows us to continue to push that model forward here in this county.
It is, if I can just pause or reflect on that, I think some of the best work that we've done in recent years as a county around affordable housing are the projects that you've been doing with private developers, where we have provided zoning capacity, enabling you to redevelop, modernize your existing affordable, and then diversify the income of the residents of a community to provide a sustainable path going forward. And that has been controversial. The zoning proposals that we have contemplated and passed, Chevy Chase Lakes is a great one. You can go there, you've cut the ribbon, you've got residents living there now. As elected officials, we had to take a lot of heat to put the zoning in place because there's a lot of NIMBYism, and NIMBYism is, unfortunately, when we start getting into proposals that have to be bigger in order to make the numbers work, we have to be willing to take the heat to make it possible. And so, I think that's a subtext of all this,
Yes.
is the politics are going to get beyond the more narrow, and they're more general about development issues. And we've got to be willing to cast a tough vote so that you can execute on this really innovative strategy that you have.
Well, we certainly appreciate that, and
Andrew?
It's not lost on us. It won't. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it won't be lost on the broader community that by 2021, as a consequence of our comprehensive effort, we will have renovated or replaced with a new unit every single one of our more than 1,800 units that are serving extremely low families and low-income families. And so that in and of itself, from the public housing authority perspective, is significant. All right, that's without additional federal subsidy.
No, I appreciate that, and I the Metropolitan comes to mind as well. Actually, my sister and her husband and their family moved into the Metropolitan and lived there and paid very market rate rents there. But having a mixed income building like that right on top of a metro in the center of some of the most expensive real estate in the county and really in the country, is transformational. And what that means to the community, what that does for the county is earth-changing. I think that the key here, though, to your point of the mixed income, is that there's a breaking point to that. And every decision that we make comes with a public cost or an opportunity cost of an additional affordable unit, or how deeply affordable some of the units can be. And the poetry here is we all support affordable housing. The prose is figuring out how to actually make the deals work and how to actually leverage as much as we can to provide as much as we can to keep up on what we all agree is a crisis, and to make sure that we're serving as many people in the community as possible. And so I appreciate the conversation. I think it's important to note that at the outset, because it becomes a good talking point to say that, well, I support affordable housing, so that's why we don't want this, or that's why we don't want that. But to actually have to make the deals work and actually have to deal in a marketplace that there are marketplace conditions where there's a certain point where you can't rent the other units. And then that affects the affordability of the subsidized units. And I think that really has to be the world where we are actually talking about, not up in the clouds, but in the ground where the actual deals get made, and where we can manipulate the market to a certain degree, but at the same time, you are a housing provider and a developer who's developing projects, and those projects have to work and have to leverage public dollars as best as you can.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. So today's presentation it's based on quantifiable metrics and hard data, and so we've talked a bit over the last years about initiatives, and so today we have the opportunity to actually review activity of the past decade, giving you information about the net new HOC owned or controlled units, net new HOC units plus net new vouchers, changes in the makeup of affordability across our portfolio, and the impact of our activities on the county's economic status as generated by a third party. So this is not our own data. This is a widely used program, and so we're not messing around with the numbers. They are simple inputs, and then it outputs the economic impact. And then finally, the level of HOC's revenues and assets that are committed to our activities. And so just if we go to turning to some of the hard data, if we go to slide 4. Thank you, Linda, you're following along brilliantly. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. HOC's hard unit inventory is up 19% over the last decade. It's pretty significant. And if you compare how much the actual cost of real estate is up, right, the latter is significantly more. And so the fact that we're actually able to get out here and compete and provide new product, rehab existing product, and continue to preserve is pretty extraordinary. Moving next, HOC serves 23% more county households than it did in 2009. Also relatively significant, and again, contrary to the view of some folks, HOC's meaningfully expanded the number of total vouchers under HOC management. Now, this is a program that is completely subject to federal appropriations, and there's fine print that reads it. This is subject to federal appropriation. We have in this contingent of vouchers some that are project based, that are attached to the actual real estate. There are a number of contracts, but the vast majority of them, in fact, are in the hands of individual families. And that provides significant choice in this county for those families, and they are exercising their options. What's also significant, and it's a little bit of foreshadowing, is that that voucher program is at the $90-ish million level. Only 10% of that stays with HOC. The vast majority of those dollars go to third-party landlords. Right? Significant. So as we turn to slide 6, yes, I'm sorry.
Go back one for me. Just on this slide, those definitions, and good morning, everybody, of very low income workforce, those are set by, can you finish the sentence?
Oh, sure. All right, I just want to make sure we're using.
That's I thought so.
I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie.
I don't want you to lie. So yeah.
Yes.
So those are HUD definitions.
Absolutely. We're not, yeah, we use, so the sort of data smoothing exercise, we're always trying to be consistent with the federal guidelines. There is some tension between HUD guidelines and Treasury affordability guidelines. Treasury runs the tax credit or any tax credit program. And so we default typically to the largest program, which is going to be our HUD guideline. We can also show the data other ways if need be, but for these slides, we're showing them consistent with HUD
And so
guidelines.
my question is, while it's good the overall number has gone up, you notice that workforce housing, the 80% to 120, is the smallest growth.
I do notice it.
And could you address, why that's the case? I think I know some of the answer, but how do you see that base versus the need in that area, and do you track what the need in that area is? That's part of your analysis as well.
So the demand, so you're getting to demand.
Yeah.
The best proxy for us, and I know that COG and others are out with estimates that this entire region needs upwards of 300,000 new households to meet affordability demand. I can't tell you, I haven't looked at their analysis. I don't know exactly how they're calculating it, but the biggest demand tool for us is, there are two of them. The first is our wait list, and there are 33, are we at 30,000 or 30,000 folks, 18,000 of whom just over are Montgomery County based. All right, and so that kind of gives us a sense of what regional demand is. That same database, Housing Path, for those of you who'd like to license it, also gives us an indicator of people's preferences for geographic location and asks information about an individual family's income.
Right.
Right. All submitted on their own.
So how does that income break down roughly in that?
Generally, it is folks who are very low income and extremely low income who are using that tool most. Right. So that's where we see the greatest demand. Right. The second area where we are able to use demand, we're working with third-party property management companies as well as in our own house, and so we're seeing folks within the various submarkets at a property-specific level make requests for housing, and so the truth of the matter is where we're seeing the most demand is very low, and sort of into market. The workforce is a tricky one, and in terms of why we aren't developing more, can I tell you that that's the first time I've been asked that question in 8 years here? But yeah, jump in.
I mean, actually, one of the things about that particular spectrum, in our immediate pipeline, which we'll talk about shortly, that's actually where a lot of those units are. So for the most part, the 80 and above are going to come from new projects. And, we've been at this sort of new program for about 7 years. And so a lot of our new construction projects haven't yet started yet. They're at, preliminary plan, site plan. And so they're moving toward construction start. And as that happens, you'll see the market rate units in those, what we call market rate units in those particular projects fit into that 80 to 120 category, and then it will begin to grow. So part of it is just the nature of how long it takes to start projects here.
But it's still relatively nominal growth against what would be.
And I think, and just to be clear, I think it's right to have the bigger growth in the other categories. I'm just kind of curious into how, when you're making the numbers work, why we've seen that and where the demand versus demand for that area. So that's helpful.
Yeah, just one more thing to add about this slide. This slide is speaking specifically about restricted units. So while there's only been a growth in 21 units in that category, it doesn't mean that we don't develop market rate units that are affordable at workforce AMIs. So this is specifically about restrictions, and honestly, I think it is a somewhat more recent development that we're restricting units at that workforce to create that spectrum. But this is specifically talking about units that are restricted, not affordable to.
Yeah, and not just us. I mean, I think the marketplace itself is acknowledging this as an area that needs more attention.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure. Okay. So I was moving to the next slide. And I think I'm on 6. So approximately 95% of HOC's rental units are affordable households earning 80% of AMI or below. So the vast majority. Nearly 3/4 of the portfolio is affordable to households which earn 50% of area median and below. Moving forward still, 1/4 of our portfolio is affordable households that earn 30% of AMI and below. And contrary to the view of some, this notion that HOC only builds market rate units, we have about 72% of units in our entire portfolio that are priced at above 120% AMI.
Okay, you alluded to a comment there. Some people have started to call you a developer, and as though you're not motivated by a mission. It's bizarre commentary. I think that's sort of what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
You are an affordable housing developer and provider.
We are. So it's funny. The team and I debate about this all the time. And from a technical standpoint, yes, we are. But quite frankly, the issue that I am unwilling to concede on is that our customers deserve respect and they deserve options, right? And as a place of choice for folks to live, Montgomery County ought to be striving to provide product that is competitive with market. And so when we simply say that we're an affordable housing developer, right, it indicates, and it has indicated for the past 30 years, that there's some value engineering exercise that happens when the numbers all of a sudden don't work. That's not acceptable.
Right. We
So-
want to have
so
quality
we-
communities
that's
that
right.
anyone would want to live in.
That's
the
absolutely
vision.
right. And so if someone on our team can't feel like they could live there, not if they're destitute,
Right.
right? Not if it's housing of the last report, then we have a problem. So yes, we are a developer,
Right.
but we are a mission-focused, mission-driven developer.
Right. But we shouldn't worry too much about what those few confused people say. We know who you are. You know who you are.
I appreciate it.
There's two problems there to me. One is this idea that you're not a mission-focused, mission-based developer. The other is the idea that being a developer is like a dirty word, which is ridiculous. So I just want to say that too, that you have to be careful saying you're a developer, because that means that you're not, that you can't be, it's mutually exclusive to be mission-based and to be
You're not.
a developer. You build housing, that's a developer. That's okay. That's good. We need housing. So, if there's anything we all agree on, it's that we need housing to keep up with needs. The fact that you're a mission-focused nonprofit developer is a good thing too.
Yeah.
Let's get through this presentation.
All right. Okay. All right. We appreciate the support, though. So on slide 8, we're talking about what has happened since 2009, and what's interesting is in the delivery of our immediate pipeline, we'll have spent somewhere around more than 1.8 billion in direct costs, and over that same period, our economic output will be more than 3.1 billion. That's pretty significant. And while housing is our core mission, what we know is that it's also a significant economic driver in this county and frankly in this entire region. And so we are also necessarily appended to the economic development business. HOC's we're often sort of the loss leader. We jump into a marketplace and help make that market. And in 1992, a couple examples. Alexander House in Silver Spring was built 7 years before Peterson Companies built downtown Silver Spring. In 2008, HOC built Metropoint in Wheaton. And let me tell you, you want to talk about a difficult transaction. I wasn't even here in this county then. And there's still horror stories about it. But I can tell you from Howard County, where I was working at the time, I donned my hard hat and my boots and walked all around it and essentially stole every idea that HOC had at the time for how to develop a mixed income community properly. There's obviously no transit in Howard County, but everything else. In 2017, we were the first to start construction in Chevy Chase. And, as you know, that building is right next to a Purple Line stop. And in 2020, we're going to break ground on the first new multifamily residential communities in Hillendale and White Oak in decades. And so, not only have we invested in our properties over the last 10 years, the county's contributed significant amounts in form of CIP, HIF, CDBG, home funds, and also through payment in lieu of taxes. And so all of those tools taken together really get us the healthiest, most vibrant housing fabric that we can have.
Heard you say pilot. We're going to be taking that issue up in a couple weeks. So a couple years, yeah, definitely not a couple years, couple weeks. So there's a lot there.
We're looking forward to it. Advancing to
Very quickly. We're on that slide. The jobs that
Sure.
so I know some of them are B2B, but HOC created jobs. What are those? Like
HOC internally?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this mentions, and maybe I'm misreading it, that you supported or created.
Sure.
What do you mean by that, and what types of jobs are those?
Sure. Well, so B2B, I mean, that includes us too. Just
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
And so clearly there are construction jobs, financing
Okay,
jobs, but we're not doing this sort of. The point of the slide is a couple things, and again, guys, feel free to jump in. We're not in this, sort of occasionally. We are absolutely in the real estate business 100% of the time.
Right.
And so as a consequence, there is a continuous cycle of economic opportunity that's caused by that involvement. But we also have to sustain our existing businesses. So there are property management opportunities. You don't see the whole real estate team, but our real estate team is pretty well rounded out at this point. And bigger than it ever has been, and with a significant level of talent. I put these my team up against most of the private sector teams, and I could tell you with confidence that we're coming out on top. So there are also obviously the residential opportunities that are a consequence of this, a follow-on effect, and so forth. So.
Yeah. And I would just add that because of the vast number of projects that we have had in the pipeline and that we have going forward, and because of the number of expertise that we hire for construction in related fields, architects, engineers, lawyers, appraisers, it's really just a broad spectrum of professionals that we have to hire to execute on our real estate development, preservation, reinvestment activities. And those jobs are created directly and some related to those professionals. And so the number of jobs may not be exactly one for those professionals, but the related activities associated with those professionals. So these jobs are either created directly or are supported or support the professionals that are involved in our real estate activities.
Thank you.
Keep going.
So there's the next slide is about our voucher payments, and again, this is largely a pass-through from the federal government. But since 2009, we're talking about just $50 million shy of $1 billion, right? And as a total voucher payment. Now, there's an economic output there of $1.3 billion as the total economic output, but the labor income, $331 million in labor income, $26 million in county tax revenue, and just under 4,700 jobs created. And this doesn't even. We're talking about just the economic impact of that. What it obscures is obviously the level of housing stabilization that occurs and preservation, and so that's also a significant benefit. Moving forward, our core goal is to retain as much value from our activities as possible so that we can continue to fund preservation, reinvestment, and expansion of affordable housing. On average, we're pouring somewhere around $13 million a year into acquisition, renovation, and new construction. Again, continuous activity. And the cash flow to HOC from its various activities is the most significant housing subsidy, actually one of the most significant housing subsidy programs in our county. And our independence is actually what allows us to vertically integrate and retain that value from those activities. Without the quasi-governmental status that we enjoy, it'd be next to impossible. I was thinking that over. We'd be unable to engage in many of the links in the real estate value chain. So I'll move forward to a preservation slide. Our preservation activities over the past decade have protected an average of 160 units every single year. We preserved and expanded rent regulation to approximately half of these units. The vast majority of the remaining unrestricted units are naturally occurring affordable housing that would otherwise be vulnerable on the open market. Moving forward, since 2009, and
Wait, can you just go back to the acquisition?
certainly,
You had said to me you thought Cider Mill was one of the most significant acquisitions in this country. Can you just say
yeah,
that?
certainly, Cider Mill is one of the most significant acquisitions in
I meant for you to say it. Yeah. It says, could you restate it?
just a
please?
little levity. I apologize. So, I mean, look, we're talking about a property that's over 40 acres, 864 units, and some of the most valuable real estate in the country. And we at HOC, because of the right of first refusal, and because of the county's insistence that we focus on preservation, that partnership by itself is unique. But adding to that, the ability to move at the pace of that transaction and capture that, the value, get it closed within the same timing as the private market would, makes it probably, I mean, that's a feather in the cap of this entire county. We had a large non-English speaking contingent who live in that property. Most of the families are at 60% or below of area median. And what we know, and look, there's nothing wrong with the real estate investment trusts that are buying and selling these, right? But when we see an opportunity to preserve affordability, we ought to go after it. And so that one required vast resources. We're talking about $150 million transaction. And what's unusual about it is that the deposit requirements were significant and binding, right? Because they weren't refundable. The timing around it, and there are many other sort of unique factors that really forced us to move incredibly quickly. And so the the market knows exactly what it's doing. But there's a notion that right of first refusal and HOC's involvement and the county's involvement in it somehow devalues the trading of these properties back and forth. Well, the beauty of the right of first refusal law is that it requires us to enter at the strike price. We're not able to sort of back the seller down, right? It leaves the seller entirely disadvantaged. Leaves the seller entirely advantaged, as they would have been with a private entity. And so in our case, we're able to preserve those homes for families and individuals. We're making an investment that, frankly, almost no private sector entity would, at a pace and scale that no private sector entity would, and helping to make sure families are stabilized for the long haul. And so, the follow-on impact in that community is going to be significant. As you know, there's an elementary school right there. Right across the street, there's a mall that is, in the throes of redevelopment discussions, et cetera. And so we've been able to kind of get in there and stabilize it.
I wanted to add to the Cider Mill acquisition because we looked at the property 3 years prior to our acquisition. There was a $20 million escalation in the price over the 3-year period, which meant that the potential increase in rents to the families that live there is significant. And we believed
Amazing that there's such an escalation as the mall across the street was
exactly,
in a tailspin.
Exactly. And so we believed that in another 3 to 5 years, it was highly likely that there would be another such similar escalation. And to pay the investors their returns would mean rent increases for the 60% of AMI families who live there. So it was really important for us to really go after and preserve that asset.
As my colleague observed, when you have a housing shortage, then you get dynamics such as the value of those properties rising, and that'll lead to investment and higher rents. So, when the county puts up walls to new development, it has a downriver effect of ultimately resulting in lesser not as positive outcomes for lower income families. Zach, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna, just to dovetail with what Karine said from the preservation standpoint, when we bought it, there was no sense that there was a buyer for Lake Forest Mall at all. And yet there was still that appreciation. And so now, there's a buyer, there's a consolidation going on, there's a potential redevelopment in the works. And Cider Mill is 43 acres. It's one of the most redevelopable sites in the entire county. And the only reason it really hadn't been before was because Lake Forest Mall was in the condition it was. So the preservation, the commission ultimately preserved this property for its as-is issues around around price appreciation. But in the back of our minds, we were also concerned, what happens when Lake Forest Mall isn't a problem? It's actually a centralizing force of investment.
Right.
What happens to the 43 acres and the residents here? Now that we're here, we can help manage the process and avoid displacement and things of that nature that, of course, private firms are not beholden to,
you.
protect. So.
All right, so moving through our reinvestment or rehabilitation slide. We've actually, since '09, comprehensively renovated a third of our housing stock. This slide actually illustrates that beautifully. You've been to some of our properties. We're happy to show you others. But substantial rehab of 20 properties and just over 2,500 units of mixed income housing. Just quickly moving forward to expansion. Our expansion activities will create 14 new communities, somewhere around 3,600 units of mixed income, amenity-rich, community-connected housing. 4 of those have been already delivered between '09 and 2019. 3, consisting of about just under 500 units, are under construction, and 7, consisting of about 2,600 units, are in active planning stages, and we'll start in 2024. Really excited about what's to come in our pipeline, and I think, I think we've got some nice surprises for you all.
Yes, you do.
And then next slide is our expanded affordability through financing. And so again, this one is really important because this is where we're partnering with other multifamily housing developers, and we financed somewhere around 708 units of rental housing. We preserved another 687, and the facts are also pretty interesting. 10% of those are going to support households at 50% or below AMIs. 85%, again, tracking with really our own portfolio, will support households at or below 60% of AMI.
Sorry, this is not a rental subsidy? This is financing?
No, this is bond financing.
To acquire buildings, or what? I'm not following you.
Generally, go ahead.
Some are
Karen.
new construction. One is an adaptive reuse of a hotel.
Okay.
Picture shown there. And
Gotcha.
then acquisition and rehab.
Okay.
One of them.
But they're not necessarily HOC.
What'd you say?
Not HOC.
Oh, no, they're not.
HOC owned.
No.
I see.
Private developer transactions.
So
Maybe
you're participating. You're
as a
you're-
lender, as
you're-
the issuer, to provide the financing, the bond financing, to make them happen.
Thanks.
Sure thing. So we have a couple case studies for you. We'll talk about, and I think Zach mentioned Hillendale. We've got Holly Hall, which is pretty incredible. If you look at that photo there, what's going to be there is significant, and this is how we're using innovative tools to really create net new affordable housing. It takes a long. You all know this already. It takes a long time to get through the entitlement process, and so we had embarked on RAD and the Rental Assistance Demonstration initiative from HUD in 2012, and this was one of our public housing sites. 96 units of really functionally obsolete housing, and so we're able to really take this, use the power of the Rental Assistance Demonstration effort and that conversion to expand opportunity. And so beyond just this one site. And so you'll see we're sending, transferring individuals into superior housing that'll be at the Fenton in Silver Spring.
You're
That's
transferring people from Holly Hall to the Fenton. Oh,
That's right.
God, what an improvement that would be. I mean, living at Holly Hall, I'm sorry, you know you're in a former dormitory or something. It's not.
It's, yeah.
How good can that feel, honestly? And where are you geographically? Or it's a fairly isolated location, unfortunately. And to be able to now be right downtown in Silver Spring, walkable to employment opportunities, to a variety of different transit service.
Well,
That's-
just services in general.
That's
I mean,
life-changing for those who
It is.
potentially
It
life-changing.
is, right. And I'd say the same thing for Victory Crossing. We partnered to make that happen as well. Go ahead and add.
And I would also add from an equity perspective, our public housing properties are, unfortunately, because of the nature of the program, they're entirely segregated. They are 100% extremely low income residents all in one place. And so in addition to the upgrade in housing, which is really important, especially since most of this property was occupied with seniors. So now they're moving into buildings that are built to ADA standards and so forth, but they're being moved into mixed income housing. So they're being moved out of the public housing program, and we did this for even our renovations. For every single RAD project we did, we introduced mixed income to what was prior to that 100% extremely low income. So there was a real important equity perspective to what we did.
Equity as in race, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
Which I think is an extraordinary sort of underpinning to this, because that's really at the heart of the mission as well. And we probably don't state it as much, but it's also one of those things that we're passionate about, because it is mission centric. It really is right at the heart of it. How do we make sure families and individuals have access to the best that Montgomery County has to offer? And so following that is, really the partnerships that are going to cause 463 new units to come about, and with pretty significant affordability. So 25% of those are going to be at 60% of AMI, another 5 that are going to be at 80%. And we're partnering with Duffy companies and others on this. We'll be using Passive House, so we're trying to also figure out how we reduce the carbon footprint and become just better neighbors all around. And we're talking about, we're actually using something called Prescient. I think we've talked a little bit about that. It's a construction system, building technique that allows us to get out of the ground faster, more stably, with more contained and controlled cost. So that's at $173 million in development costs. And then literally, probably not because it's HOC, but because of the partnership, my most favorite partnership story in the country, is the sort of often ballyhooed Housing Authority partnering with county government to sort of take the mantle and push the idea of what's possible. And so we are working with the county government to build a world-class recreational and aquatic center that is the base of a brand new senior building, and open that entire sector of Silver Spring up, because there'll be a third building as well. But what we're creating there is just incredibly exciting, and it also harkens back to the past. This intentional reinvestment in property, and so that was the agency's first public housing building, Elizabeth House, and so now Elizabeth Square. In its
The
newest,
agency's first?
yeah, it was our first. And look, if it rains, and you're in the building, like, you don't have to go outside. It's raining.
Wow.
Right. I mean, it's what it was. It was functional for the time, but we're in 2019, and so I really want to thank the team and the county for the support, but also the commissioners, because you want to talk about some difficult animated conversations. Elizabeth Square has brought out the best in this agency, in this county. and I just can't wait to see it. And then what I'll also say is, once again, we were able to partner with private sector to give people choice. We're introducing choice into affordable housing because persons who are in those rental assistance demonstration units that are restricted at incredibly low rents are able to now choose Victory Crossing or Victory Haven for opportunities. They don't have to wait for the new building. And so, as I said, we continue to be excited about it. And so as we push through, this was an important partnership with Lee Development Group, and Holy Cross continues to be a part of it. And of course, as I said before, Montgomery County government. So, yeah.
Pretty spectacular.
Yeah. And so with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you might have.
And I also just wanted to add, the reason that, in particular, Holly Hall and Elizabeth Square, but also several other projects were Housing Opportunities Commission a few years ago really jumped on the rental demonstration project and was able to get ownership through what was a limited approval of applications. So not all housing authorities in the country were as successful at the RAD demonstration approvals as HOC, and Mr. Reamer will remember, because we had discussions about this, the amount of work that HOC invested in to get those applications in like right away, to get those approvals so that they can leverage these assets. Because part of the problem was when it was public housing, even if they wanted to, they didn't have the kind of ownership that allows them to leverage those assets. So I think we can't discount the work of several years ago
Right.
that HOC did on the front end to make sure that we had approved applications, because again, they were limited and there were many housing authorities across the country that didn't jump on it as fast as HOC and didn't get approvals. And so I just
So we have
wanna-
operational excellence enabling
Right.
us to compete successfully for resources that other communities just
So I
can't get
I
to.
just don't think we should forget the background of that, of everything that HOC invested several years ago to make sure that that happened.
But you paved one parking lot. All right. Okay. Nope. No one is. And I think that's part of the conversation, right? Okay. There was a mistake with the parking lot. You've admitted that, and these things happen in an operation of your size. We don't want them to happen, and we're going to have that conversation, and we're going to figure out how to avoid those problems. But let's see the forest for the trees here. This is a highly successful partner to the county that is achieving the mission that this community really has, which is to have a place for everyone to live, or at least aspire to have a place for everyone to live. And if you weren't out there making that happen for us, where would we be? Okay, Mr. Friedson up and Mr. Joanna following.
Thank you for that. First of all, thanks for the presentation. It's really good to get a broad sense of the breadth of financing and development and retaining and creating of affordable housing that you're doing. We generally get it on a case-by-case, project-by-project basis, but it's rare that we get a chance to kind of see the full body of work and the full breadth of the work that you do. So I appreciate the discussion this morning. And I agree. I think it's really about housing affordability. It's about inclusivity, and how do we create the communities that we want, that have the values that we share, and that's really, I think, what a lot of the projects that you've talked about this morning are speaking to. I'm particularly interested on the two final projects because I think there are lessons there. One, I think it's great because it speaks to the leveraging of every level: private, public, federal with RAD, state, and federal pass-through opportunities and tax credits and other things, and local county resources to make projects work that otherwise wouldn't work. And I think if you took any leg of that multi-legged stool out, neither of those deals work, I would imagine. And so I think, I think it's a really good lesson that these things are really complicated and that we all have to be pulling in the same direction and working together. And I think you're uniquely positioned to leverage more than others based on your classification and based on your access to certain programs, particularly federal programs that others wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And so leveraging you with the partnership of county agencies, with the partnership of private developers, really allows for, special projects to happen that otherwise wouldn't be possible. But I specifically wanted to talk about the Hillendale project, the Prescient. You kind of mentioned it a bit. We've had previous conversation just very briefly about this, but I'm fascinated by this. The biggest problem that we face in housing now, and certainly in large multifamily housing, which is probably what we need a lot more of, is construction costs and the massive escalation of construction costs. This Prescient example that you use, that I think is the first, am I correct, is the first in Montgomery County it's been used. Can you talk a little bit about that, of what the cost savings are, who's used it before, how we can leverage this, what's the story, one of the challenges we get is you get over 4, 5, 6 stories, you have to use steel. Steel is very expensive. My understanding is this basically allows you to go to basically 12-ish stories, and with a steel or steel-like construction, but it's basically prefab. But could you just talk through how it works, why it helps, the cost savings there, and how this could be replicated to other projects to save construction costs, to be able to bring projects online at a better cost?
Absolutely. I mean, you essentially boiled it down, and I'll ask the team to jump in. We spent a good bit of time researching it. We've seen it in action. We've seen it in the built environment. We've seen it under construction. You're faced with doing stick or stick over podium, or again, as you pointed out, concrete and steel, and the stick over podium is only going to get you what we have. I mean, essentially. And when we're talking about need as vast as this, and the need to kind of move faster and control costs, you've got to look at new technologies. And Prescient is interesting. This is not is not the best comparison, but imagine building a base in pieces that all fit together, that are designed as you're drawing, as the architects are drawing, and the rate of error is minimized because it's machine crafted, and then the parts are designated. The actual location of the parts are designated. The channels for electrical and broadband and things of that nature already within it. And so you're not having to sort of come behind after using a naturally grown material or a fabricated material and cut out holes and do all this other thing. So that by itself. So you get the base up. And once you get the base up, then you've got all the trades coming in to those lower floors doing that activity as you're now putting the other floors on top of it. And so,
So it's not just the material; it's the time.
Time is money,
and so the labor can go faster.
That's right.
And so you're still using people to build it, but the timeline of bringing it online.
That's correct.
Is much quicker.
That's correct. And so, as I said, we've seen it in Denver. I've actually been in buildings in which it sort of being used under construction. I've been at their training facility. I've actually seen it fabricated, and then been in buildings that are under operation. It's in Charlotte is using it pretty significantly at this moment. Maryland just hasn't done it yet, but we're about to. It's Montgomery County, so why not break the mold? And what I can
We're breaking the mold by using a mold. It sounds like
exactly. And the moment we use it, I can pretty much guarantee you that folks are going to start to pick it up. Did I leave anything out?
I mean, I would just add that first of all, I would sort of echo what Stacy said about how much time we actually spent with the system, because it's not a system where you can design a building and then apply the system to it. You actually have to design your building with the system in mind, and that was a lesson we learned. So we spent a significant amount of time, and I would add that this is a public-private partnership, and it was a lot of the research and this recursive thinking about how to use this system most efficiently came from our partner, the Duffy companies, who were willing to spend 2 years with us thinking about how to make this system cost-effective. And so the magic of this, and the reason why we kept at it for those years, is because you get density bonus for doing MPDUs. But the problem in a lot of cases is that to get that density bonus, you have to switch to a more expensive, intensive construction type. And so it makes the entire building more expensive, and thus the extra density can't be realized because now your building's cost ineffective. And
You
so
have to switch because you have to make the building bigger. You have to
Right.
add more units in order for the numbers all to work out.
So what we discovered is that instead of building stick over podium, where there's a concrete level or two underneath, that we can actually build 12 stories of prescient for the exact same price per unit. So we're going to get 5 additional floors without changing our price per unit. And that's revolutionary because it means no longer do we have to leave density bonus on the table. We don't, and so, you all approve these incentives, and sometimes there are unintended obstacles to these. And so this will really help solve one of those major unintended obstacles.
I think that's an amazing point. I think that this could be a game changer for housing construction, and one of the main obstacles that we consistently hear of, hey, we have the density, we'd love to do the density, but we can't afford the construction costs, and it just the dollars and cents don't work. And so I'd love to, as this progresses, to get either another briefing specifically on this of what the cost savings were if the chair would be interested, or something at least in written
No, we can do that.
form to show here's how we would have done it
Sure.
if it was standard construction, steel or concrete and stick, stick over podium. Here's what it was in prescient. Here's what we believe the cost savings were. Here's how much shorter the time was. I think if we can use this as an example and spread the gospel to the broader community and demonstrate this as a proof of concept. One, I think it'll demonstrate the agency as a leader on this, and I think it also could help to navigate through what has been a challenge for others in seeing a successful model of how to save money on construction costs.
Yeah, and we fortunately have so Hillendale Gateway can actually be it because we started, of course, because we're in Hillendale, we don't have any comps for new construction. So we actually started just, of course, you're going to put wood frame there. You're not going to this isn't a market that's ready for mid-rise, high-rise. And so we actually have, and we're about to resubmit for site plan. So this is going to start construction in a year, and we're going to see if we were right or wrong. And but it was actually a building that started design.
We're betting that we're
really
betting that we're
hopeful.
going to be right. Though.
Really feel great about it. But we actually have it designed both ways. We have it priced both ways, and so on and so forth. And the other thing I would add is it's non-combustible, as opposed to combustible, from a fire perspective. And the other piece is you can build with wood frame to get even the units you can get out of that. You're having to really spread out across the site, and so you're chewing up open space. And so it's got other community benefits in terms of being able to produce more units and actually have smaller footprints and more open space and so forth. So.
Well, I'm really excited about this. I look forward to continuing that conversation, learning about it, and using our platform and your hard work to share that with the public and the community, because I think that there could really be long range benefits to this. We're never going to meet our housing needs with 4 to 6 story buildings along transit lines. It's never going to actualize the vision that we have for BRT and other and other transportation investments unless we are really creating the density that we need in order to meet those needs. And we can't do it if construction costs don't justify a private sector market that can actually build these things. And so if this is the answer or one of the answers or among the answers, I am incredibly excited. I'll just on Elizabeth Square, I agree that this is a really exciting project that brings everybody together. I'm particularly excited of it as a model for a very urban area in need of a world-class recreational facility. I could think of another place where there is serious need for a recreational facility that is in an urban environment that I have mentioned. It rhymes with Bethesda. Anyway, I look forward to seeing that project and how it works. I think that there is a model there that we can do, even if it is a slightly different version of that. But I'm hopeful to keep tabs on how that project moves forward, the success of that project, and see how we can replicate it in other areas. Again, we can't build create more land in our urban areas, but we can better utilize the land area that we have to create better facilities. And I think Elizabeth Square is a really good example of that. And I'm really excited to see that project move forward and hope we can replicate it elsewhere.
So I'd like to keep hope alive. I'd like to follow up with a conversation about the construction method and maybe have DPS in the conversation. Maybe there's a way that we could develop sort of an excellence, center of excellence at DPS so that the private sector can, start tuning in here and saying, well, it's not so risky because if I go down this path, we've got people who know how to get it done with me. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the presentation and for all the work. And Councilmember Friesen, good thing is that we're so interconnected. The Silver Spring is so close to Bethesda that folks can come on over and take advantage. No, this is great. I had two questions. One is related to vacancy rates. What are the vacancy rates now? And if you can break it down by versus market versus your affordable, if you know that, but you can get back to me on that piece if you don't know
I can
that.
get back to you.
Yeah.
We're about a 5% vacancy rate right now.
And has that been consistent?
Across portfolio?
Has that been consistent over time? Has that gone up or down? If so, what's changed it?
It's gone down.
I think it's gone down over the last couple years, but I certainly am happy to give you a specific information.
Yeah, that's
by
relatively
submarket
low. Is that on par with other housing authority? Like, where do we fit in the
with other housing authorities.
Yeah.
Well, we're not really we're not a direct comp. I think it depends on the housing authority.
Right.
You can
Seems good to me. It seems like that's a low rate, but I don't.
Well, assuming you're not shuttering units,
Right.
and causing them not to be included, it's okay. It's not awesome. 98% is awesome.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
So what's keeping us from getting? What's the
We're working hard at it
to get there?
Okay. We're working hard at it. What's keeping us from getting there? We have enhanced our use of Housing Path, which is our wait list system.
Right.
We are recognizing, to your earlier point around workforce and slightly higher incomes, that Housing Path is not actually an option for most folks who are in the sort of 80%. And so the team recently started to market those more broadly, those opportunities more broadly. And I think those are really the sort of predominant things.
Yeah, because when you hear 30,000 wait lists, you're like you
Yeah.
want everything full,
Absolutely.
right? And I know that's
Yeah.
what you all want. And I'm just, is it a case management? Are there?
No, so the wait list is everybody who wants
Right.
to live somewhere. But everyone who wants to live somewhere, there are other challenges in some number of folks in that list. And it's interesting that you asked this question. My board members are routinely pressing on it. And the fact of the matter is we are working to ensure enhancement of those persons where we can. And then there's still others who quite frankly wouldn't qualify, and there are other challenges, and so we're trying to figure out appropriate housing solutions for them. The vast majority of the folks who are on our wait list want a voucher.
Right.
That's the sort of number one, which is also a reason that the team began to really more broadly market opportunities to folks in that sort of band of, and it's really probably like 60 to 80.
Mm-hmm.
So they're marketing more aggressively, and so we've seen as a consequence of that pick up on occupancy.
Yeah, and so just as a follow-up, I'm just interested in the vacancy issue, the breakdown of
I got you.
what types of units.
Absolutely.
You can just
Certainly.
send that would be great.
Sure.
I am very interested in and we've talked about this before, the construction types that
Sure.
can lower costs, because, we're all thinking about, how do we have this crisis, how do we get housing to as many people as possible at a rate that they can afford? And certainly the costs of construction are a big part of that. How much money we invest, how much we're able to leverage. I do think that we need, and I know I've said this to you, that we always need to be trying to get the best deal we can when we're working with our development community. And so there's a lot of factors involved.
Sure.
And obviously, if you can lower construction costs, that's a big one. So I'm eager to talk about that. So thank you this has been helpful, and I look forward to following up with you guys.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. I was so excited about this project that I forgot I had another question as you were going through the presentation. You have a terrific staff. You talked about it earlier. I guess my question is, if you had more staff, more resources, could you do more?
I mean, generally, the answer is always going to be yes. But look, I got to tell you, I mean, my job is to take all the shots and push as many roadblocks out of the way for the team. That's basically all I do. The team themselves is less about more staff than it is about how we get more resources that are appropriately directed toward mission. And so, if I had an ask, it's going to be around resources other than human capital.
So do you think if you got more resources other than human capital, but didn't get additional human capital, that you could do significantly more?
I know I could, because we can buy look, I mean, what's the
The
magic?
staff is looking around like, that sounds like more work.
No,
But
they. Yes. So look,
I tried to help you. I just want the record to reflect that I offered coworkers and
the reward for more work for a great job is more work, right? That's the reward.
Yeah.
Right. That's essentially what you just said to me. It's like,
Sure.
It sounds like you're doing a great job. You want more work, right? Yes. And so, happy to accept that. But honestly, when we partner with the private sector, we're not simply partnering for a name. We're essentially carving out a part of their resource and using it to our end. That's it. And so I think there's enough capacity between our team and at the margin, sure, a couple people here or there, absolutely. But what we need most is capital.
So from a
Right,
programmatic standpoint, what does that capital look like?
So in 10 years, we were able to do all of this work. And it's kind of 7, the last 7 where we've been pushing and driving this thing. And so what is it? Help me simplify the entitlement process. Help me get 9% credits from the state that are directed at HOC. Help us not be penalized because we're a high cost area, and as a consequence, we don't get tax credits. Notice, we didn't use tax credits in Chevy Chase. We could have used 4%. We could have done that. We didn't. It's the lazy way out, right? You put those resources where they're most appropriate. We didn't need to do it there. So it's, we're having constant conversation about needing more volume cap. The county has volume cap that it doesn't use for economic development. Give it to us.
Well, I'd love to continue this part of the conversation, because I think we need to, really think through what this mean, and what do resources look like? What of this is, regulatory? What of it is, resource focus? I totally agree with you on the 9%. This was a big focus of mine with the new housing director. We've talked about, he had, was part of the effort in Northern Virginia to, focus 9% tax credits in Northern Virginia. I think we need to do something similar, but it's going to require our state colleagues to focus on that so that we're not getting penalized. All 3 of us were just at a terrific 9% tax credit deal yesterday in the Scotland community, so historic community in Potomac.
Sure.
That project isn't possible, I don't think, without 9% tax credit deal. What you can do with a 9% deal, I think, is game changing to affordable housing, and to hit it at every level of need, and the creativity that you can do. So I'm all ears on what we can do at the county level to advocate and to change the way that the competitive 9% process works, so that we're not being one of the areas of greatest need in this region, Prince George's and Montgomery County, that I would pair together, that has high costs, but has the greatest housing, by the very virtue of the reason why we have the affordable housing crisis that we have. We're being penalized in terms of the competition to get public assistance, additional public assistance to create affordable housing. To me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so, how we navigate through that, I am all ears, and hope that we can continue to work together to figure those things out. And I don't think it's just an HOC question. I think it's a across the board, nonprofit affordable housing developers, private developers who want to partner with you or with other nonprofit affordable housing providers. I mean, I think that this construction piece and the 9% piece, if we could get those two things right, I think that the sky is the limit, literally and figuratively, and we could really move things forward.
You just mentioned the volume cap. Can you talk a little bit more about what you meant there?
Certainly. Each county, by formula, each county is seeded from the federal government through the Department of Housing and Community Development an amount of cap for bond issuance. And frankly, what typically happens across the state is that some piece of that volume cap goes back to the state, right? And they do with it what they need to. Some of it's economic development, some of it's housing, some of it's single family, some of it's multifamily. Well, we happen to need more multifamily cap, all right, more housing cap, quite frankly. And there's a piece of it for economic development that comes to the county every single year. Every year. But I'm not sure. You're not using all of it. But we just said housing is economic development.
Well, we're having a meeting soon about the HIF. We're going to be going through, a variety of housing finance topics. So Linda is taking notes, and we'll see what more we can find out about that issue.
Happy to supply you with all the information you could ever want about it.
Well, why don't you follow up with Linda? That'd be great.
Absolutely.
And I just can't help but, actually, I wanted to ask you about the governance issues that are at the, whatever this hearing is tonight. But before I do that, I want to put a quick plug in. One of the ways that we could support you in Hillendale with that amazing project you're doing is related to the transportation piece, which sadly has been derailed by the executive branch, county executive. There was a strategy to provide for a solution for transportation to serve the area that was, agreed to. County executive came in, derailed it, wants another alternative. These things all are related. And it's not just supporting you with housing finance or with zoning. There's companion pieces, transportation, education, so on and so forth. So I have been beating the drum on that transportation piece at the committee, the transportation committee, but I can't help but comment on it because it's part of the puzzle. And you've got a project that relies upon a transportation solution just as much as any other project in that area, and now we're not getting forward movement on that, and that is a problem that is impeding the success of an affordable housing development that we want to see move forward. Back to the issue of this public hearing tonight. Can you explain what you understand that the purpose of that hearing is about?
So I had the opportunity to speak with the chair, Delegate Pam Queen, and what she indicated to me was that it really, for her, was a learning exercise about HOC and what it does and how we partner with county government, how we're managed. She indicated that frankly, they know very little. And so we have put together a combination, a pretty large packet of information about the agency, its origins, how we're run, how the board is chosen. They're all volunteer. I mean, you all know this, they're volunteers. It's essentially a full-time job, though. I mean, occasionally they get a sandwich from us.
As much as we see our commissioners here, we are aware that they spend a lot of time on it.
They do, a lot of time. We're obviously going to talk about the impact on the county and affordable housing. I mean, our aim is to change the way we house people. It's super simple, and so we want to impress that upon them, and we're going to ask them for their support and.
So it sounds like delegates have an open mind. They're not necessarily an axe to grind. This is a get to know you session.
The members of the committee with whom I've spoken, yes.
Okay. Well, I do plan to attend. I'll probably be a little bit late, but I'll be there, and I'll share some comments as well. This was very helpful today. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Stacy and team, for putting the briefing together.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, to be continued. Thank you.